All right, guys, I figured I'd make a video on this since I'm kind of fresh on this stuff. And I'm going to go over some of the issues with these that you have to resolve if you're going to make it a daily driver. And some guys might not know this when they're going to start a build and find out later that they're in for a lot more work and time and money than they originally anticipated. So if you're looking at one of these as a project, definitely you're going to want to watch this video and learn a little bit about them. Now, I've been working on these since they were near new, and they had problems back then. So we're going to kind of go over all those things in this video, all of them that I can remember. And one of the things you'll find out is a lot of the parts, especially if you have a 1980 or older, are not available. And one of the reasons for that is back then they were really not that great. They had a lot of issues in the early years. One of them is the fuse block. So if you have a 1980 or earlier Rabbit pickup or car or convertible, whatever, one of the things you're going to find is the wiring has some issues. And where the issue lies is a couple different things. In fact, there's a lot. Okay, there's a lot of problems with the wiring on these. Number one, the grounding clusters get corroded. There's little round things I could show you, but I can't. I don't have the dash apart. The little round things with all these slip-on connector grounds. You need to take all those off, clean everything super clean, and either get the connections really nice and tight. You might have to take the ends of the wires and dip them in Tarnade, okay, and then rinse them off really good and neutralize the Tarnade, and that'll help get rid of the tarnish that's on them. And then after you're all done and you get good grounding connections, you're going to want to coat them either with dielectric grease. Dielectric grease does not improve the connection. It stops the corrosion from coming back. So you could use dielectric grease or you could use regular grease, and you're probably going to get the same results with either one. The regular grease will not impede with the connection, where the dielectric can. Okay, so dielectric means stop the flow of electricity, just so you know. You can look at the things on these videos. There's a lot of videos out on that, but you can use it. It does work to stop corrosion, but it does not help the connection. So you have to get the connection fixed first, and then you can protect it with dielectric grease. So that's one of the issues, is the grounding clusters. And I'll tell you how it would happen. The original German, or I don't know if it was really, maybe it was made outsourced, window rubber had the little groove in it for the chrome, and that would crack and leak in the corners right here, and the water would come in and go down the dash and get on two things. One is the grounding clusters would get wet and they would get corroded. The other thing is the fuse block would get corroded. We used to have, back in the day when these were new, brand new fuse blocks for either one. They are not available today for the early ones. So if you have an early one, it doesn't mean throw the car away. It means you're probably going to have to rewire into the fuse block that you have. This truck I did with a buggy harness. So we just use a regular VW buggy harness. You can see here the fuse block has similar to a Beetle fuse block, and you got to use all the relays. So when you do it, you got to make sure that when you turn the key to on position, that there's a relay in there to take the load off the switch. If you don't, your switch is going to go bad, so you'll just create more problems if you don't rewire it exactly the way it was wired originally. Well, at this truck, we did the air conditioning a little bit different. This is how you turn off the AC. It's right here in the middle. this truck does have working AC. Most of them didn't have AC, or they had AC and guys disconnected it, and we'll go over why that is in a second. So the Rabbit diesel, why did they not use the AC? Okay, on the stock 1600 or 1500, when you turn the AC on, your maximum speed is about 55 miles per hour in this truck or in these cars. That's the maximum. If you're going uphill, it's a lot less than that. Okay, so most of the time you aren't able to use the AC in these. That's why I'm going to recommend something in this video, that you upgrade the engine to the 1.9 liter, which this truck has been done. That solves the issue. Has plenty of power, especially if you add a turbo to it. The 1.6 with the turbo is better than the 1.6, but it's still nothing like the 1.9. The 1.9 improves the drivability of this truck immensely. The 1.9 AAZ was out in the early 90s, mid 90s, and that solves the issue. Okay, so if you want to build one of these, you go to the 1.9. Forget the 1.6. That is if you want AC. So, and guys go, well, hey, I'm fine with just open up the vent wings. We'll show you those in a second. I'm still letting the silicone dry. Once it's all dry, then I'll show you. Vent wings on these were an option. Okay, the LX truck had the wood grain dash. This is an LX, very rare 1980 LX. They did not make very many LXs in 1980. Most of them had. The difference you can tell is the LX had the clock. Okay, the had the clock, which is here. Of course, it doesn't work, and who cares if it does, really? But it had the double opening dash. It had the wood grain. The base truck had just one hole for the speedometer, and that was it. Really plain Jane looking. I have one of those dashes, and they're pretty ugly. So you might think, well, the wood grain's kind of ugly, but no, it's way more attractive than, believe me, the old black dashes they had in these. So you see all the silicone all over that vent wing. These were the most poorly made item ever that I've ever seen from Volkswagen. And believe me, I've seen some crap that VW has made, but these are terrible. Okay, so reason there's silicone on here, I'll let it dry, chip off everything that it's not going to be used. I just want to make sure that it doesn't leak. Is one thing is these are glued on like your rearview mirror, and I don't care. You can glue them 100 times. When they were brand new, guys would open their vent wing, and the vent wing would fall out onto the ground, and there went the vent wing. That's why a lot of these cars are gone, by the way, guys. And the other thing was, it was really easy to steal the car. You just pry on here a little bit, and the vent wing would just pop loose, and you could get in the car and steal it. So a lot of them, that happened back in the day because this poorly made, glued on connected vent wing. In fact, this is a Beetle one here. I just put it on there for aesthetics, because it just looks better, and I'm going to trim off all the ugliness here once it's dry. So, just so you know. So anyway, vent wings. Well, you go, hey man, I could fix those. I know I can get that glue to hold. Okay, good. Maybe you could. Maybe you're really good and you could get them to hold. But the thing you won't get to happen is this vent wing, as soon as you wash the car, water pours. Does not just leak, it pours inside the car. So they would always leak right here, okay, water, and it would leak inside the car. It was awfully made. You know, one thing I got to say about VWs is they took the same idea and they just kept refining it and making it better and better and better. And now they've got a decent water-cooled car. They stick with the same idea. So they figure out their issues and start resolving them. So in the later years, they actually put in a hole on here for this thing. They put a hole in the glass. I think they actually put a rivet with a hole or something like that later years. in the late 80s. I don't remember. I haven't seen one in so long. I don't, know for sure. So there was that issue. So you had water leaks from the windshield. You had water leaks from here. Honestly, they were kind of a joke back in the day. Even the old GTIs, okay, just so you know, they were a joke as far as that goes. They were great power machines, fun to drive, but, they had a lot of little crappy issues. So the fuse block on here. There's a block of things on here that has fuses in it. And you say, well, it's just a bad connection. So you might start working on the bad connections, and you find out what really the problem is inside that fuse block on the early cars. Inside there's like a little rivet that connects each piece together, and you can't get to it anyway. You can't split the thing open and fix any of this stuff, okay? But there's a little rivet on there, and that rivet would get corrosion on it, and that would not connect anymore, and it would connect intermittently. So you might be driving down the road, headlights work one day, next day you get in it, the headlights don't work. The brights work, but the headlights don't. I had times where, before I rewired this, where I would turn on the headlights and I'd have one headlight, and there was no brights. And then the next time I go to drive it, I'd have brights, no low beams. And, it was just constant, and it was inside the fuse block where the issue is. So that fuse block has to be replaced. They're not available. So the only thing you can do is either rewire it to the later model or just rewire it with the buggy harness. So just so you got that task ahead of you if you have one of these early Mark I Rabbits. So the other thing is, they were gutless as hell, even with the 1.6 from the factory. You have to do a lot of motor modifications. The 1.7s were pretty quick, but the injection problems you had, one of the problem with the injectors is you would they have that snorkel that comes over here and it sits about right here. I'm thinking you pull the top off of that and take carburetor spray and move the piston up and down. A lot of times you'll have drivability issues. That solves most of them. Run the piston up and down, spray some carburetor spray in there, blow it out with air. That was a common thing we used to have happen. I highly recommend changing this thing to diesel 1.9, and we're going to go over that right now. You might say, hey, I like the 1.6, 1.7, I guess are, I forget the size, 1700s we call them, I guess. And those things, you might say, hey, those things worked really well. See a wire that came off from servicing this. They worked really well. Yeah, they were okay, but you can get with the 1.9 liter 50 miles to the gallon. So people go, oh, I want the original engine because it got 50 miles a gallon. Guess what? 1.9 with a turbo, 50 miles a gallon. I still get 50 on this thing. I got the same gas mileage with the 1.6 with no power as I do with the 1.9. Okay, so 50 miles a gallon. Okay, and the best thing about it is you have about the same power. In fact, this thing, when I get done with this, we're going to do an injector pump upgrade on this. It will have more power than the 1.7, and it'll probably still get very close to 50 miles a gallon on the highway. So, and that's because it's got the 5-speed trans. The 4-speed trans, actually, if you have the correct one, actually has a taller fourth gear than most of them. This one is I think it's a 4T 5-speed. You got to go to a German guy who knows the cars and have him get you the parts you want, because that's the only way you're going to get the right stuff. He gave me the 4T trans. It has the same fifth gear as the 4-speed. And that's another issue, that if you have a diesel with the 4-speed, it was even slower, okay? Because fourth gear was geared too high, and it just had no power. As soon as you turn on the AC, you ain't going anywhere. So there's that major issue there. So 4th gear on them, if you have a 4-speed, not good. The 5-speed was much better if you have the correct transmission. You don't just go grab any 5-speed you can find. You got to get the correct one. I think it's the 4T. The best guy to call, if you're buying one of these and you want to build one and buy an engine, listen, don't call him to just talk to him. He doesn't want to waste time with that. He's a business owner, okay? The guy from Quality German Auto Parts, what's his name, Thomas, is a really good guy. If you buy stuff from him, if you just call him and want information, it ain't happening. But if you're buying an engine from him, he will give you the correct stuff. And he's a really good guy, okay? But, of course, he knows he's in business. If he talks to people and he doesn't make money, that doesn't make him any money. So he's very smart. And he gets these engines from Germany, brings them over to the U.S., sells them for a fair price. Not the cheapest, but definitely, I think, a fair price. So call him if you're interested in building one. Get a quote, buy the motor, change it to diesel. The other thing about the diesel is you eliminate smog check. If you're in California, all you got to do is go down to the referee. And this is what it used to be. I don't know if it's changed. I think it's still the same now. But you go to the referee. Basically, the guy has you fire up the engine. You fire up the engine, and he goes, "Oh, yeah, it's diesel." They don't even look at anything else, pretty much. I've had them just keep the lid shut, fire it up. Here's diesel. Okay, shut. Whatever. Signs it off. You're eliminating smog check. That's why I tell people on the same thing on a Vanagon. If you're going to get your Vanagon instead of going with the freaking Subaru, I mean, yeah, you get more power with that and everything else. You get 30 miles a gallon with one of these AAZs in a Vanagon with a turbo on it, okay? And it gets down the road fine. And then you eliminate smog check over. Never have to do it again. So that's the other reason. If you've got a Rabbit, trying to keep it smog legal, getting all the smog equipment is near impossible to do in California. You can't find the parts. Parts are just gone. So change it over to diesel. You get the same amount of power. You do end up with a little bit of vibration in the dash, of course. Get used to that. But it's way better on fuel. And especially if you go with the AAZ, you can put your air conditioning in it. With the 1.6 liter, you're not going to run the air. And you're not going to have vent wings. So it's not fun. So like I said, when it's 105, 110 out, and you got your AC on, your engine's running cool, it works great. The other thing I did too on this is I went to the aluminum radiator. I found out that the old one was halfway plugged anyway. But the aluminum radiator is actually more efficient. Right, I don't know where I left myself off, but my phone overheated. So I think I was talking about upgrading the radiator to the aluminum is way better. Another thing I would do if I was going to keep this eventually is I would get the dual fans with the aluminum shroud for a little more cooling, especially if you're going to run your AC all the time. They do, when it's driving, the middle, a little bit above the middle is where the thermostat is. The fans turn on just above that, so it's almost at 3/4 hot before the fans turn on. So it's, on the gauge. So that's normal. Okay, let me tell you the worst mistakes some people make buying one of these is buying one that's all original. And some guys go, "Oh, I want it because it's all original, and original was the best." No, these things from the factory had major, major flaws. And probably the reason that one you find that was in original condition that sat for years and years probably had a major issue, and somebody just stopped driving it because it was just such a pain in the ass that they just decided forget it. So like I said, the 1600 way underpowered with the diesel, with the AC on, absolutely useless. You can't even drive it with AC. So to me, what's the reasons you get a water cooled versus the air cooled, right? You want to have AC, so guys take it all out. Most of them are taken out of them, or they just are disconnected or not working. and that's why, because they had no power. So original, I've seen guys go out and spend, because the truck was original, had original paint, original engine, original transmission, they've gone out and spent 35 grand for one of these. And I think that was, in my opinion, that's foolish. Because if you're going to drive it, you're going to have to do some huge upgrades. If you're going to drive it even as a daily driver around town and stuff like that. The original stuff, like the fans on these things, were garbage. You know, these old fans, they start to break and everything. The original radiator in these things was the old copper style or whatever, and they had issues. Okay, the cooling system in these wasn't the best. Okay, you got to upgrade all that stuff. The wiring, it might work when you buy the truck, but you're going to be nickel and diming on wiring and playing with stuff and pulling the dash and fixing all the ground clusters. One of the other things I was going to tell you, and I forgot to, is on the grounding clusters, what we would do is they would get loose on the dash. They would actually corrode where they went to the dash. And so we would fix that, but we'd also put a separate ground. So we double ground the grounding clusters because there are major issues. I've done all that to this truck. So, but I'm just saying, those are all things that you're going to have to do to one. And so you spent a ton of money on it already because you got it because it was all original, and I got to have it all original and all that stuff. And you're still going to put a ton of money into that thing. And then maintaining it is going to cost you a lot because it's the original stuff. Like I said, there's a lot of issues. Let's talk about some of the engine issues with the 1.6 liter and the 1.5s. Okay, 1.5 diesels and even the 1.6 gas engines. These are all there. Okay, so you buy one that's all original because I want it because it's original. All right, okay, cool. 1.6 liter, maybe you'll figure out right now that that wasn't such a great idea. The 1.6 liter, all four corners of the block, right here, 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 and here, where the head mounts to the block, were too thin. And as soon as they overheat, all it takes is one time. As soon as they overheat, the corner of the block cracks. The block, not the head, the block. So you have to replace the engine. What we did back in the early days to fix that is, and it's what it was, is how you could know that it had that issue is if you pull the valve cover and you don't know what year your engine is, because a lot of them have been replaced. Okay, the 1 point, they also, the early ones also had mechanical lifters, so you had to adjust them, and they had little shims you had to change underneath the cam. You'll do that once, and you'll be like, oh my God, no. That's why you upgrade to the later model engine. The early ones had a really big hump right here for the oil return because they were mechanical lifters. They didn't have hydraulic lifters. And they had that issue as well. So if you've got one that's early, you'll look at it, it has a big hump on there. It probably tell you that it might have the cracked block issue. Okay, that's what I think they were even doing recalls on them back at the Volkswagen dealer, and a lot of those got changed to the later model 1.6. Okay, so but they're still out there. Believe me, they're still out there. So how you know is you take the valve cover off and you would check, and if it had 12 point, or what are they called, triple square head bolts, those are usually okay. It's the ones with the Allen bolts that were no good. And what we used to do to fix it back years ago is we take the heads off and we would put deep set studs in the head. So you'd replace all the bolts with studs, in the head and put nuts on them. And the studs, we put them down deeper into the head, to the block, and then that fixed the issue with the block cracking. But you still have the power issue. So to me, it's just like, if you've got that engine, the best thing to do is to take it out. And yeah, they're not cheap. They got Williams 1.9s. You take out the stock engine, you put the AAZ in, and they go right in the same area. They're just a half-inch taller. And the reliability of the AAZ and the power is so much better, because now you can actually use your AC. You still get the same gas mileage. Mileage doesn't change enough to even blink an eye at, okay? And the power difference is just amazing. I mean, this truck right here, I had a load of us in it, and I'm going uphill to get on the freeway at 75, you know, shifting into fifth, you know. So with a turbo, it had going uphill, pretty good size uphill to get on the freeway. By the time I got on the end of the on-ramp, I was going 75. That's pretty quick. It's not like ultimately fast, but it's very, very quick and plenty of power. It goes up the hills fine, you know, no issues with any of that stuff. So, which if you have the 1.6 liter, you go, as soon as you start to go uphill, it's like literally, it's like driving a 40 horse. It's like driving a 40 horse VW. And if you have a load of stuff in it, can you imagine just loading your car full of people with a 40 horse and going uphill? That's kind of what it's like. So, I mean, it's not bad. But like I said, the other issues. Mechanical adjusted lifters. Terrible. Major problem. It takes forever to adjust those. You had to have a whole stack of shims to replace them, to know, you know, you have to measure them and go, okay, this one here is this size, and get the right one. And you're not going to have those things today. So it's going to be very difficult to adjust the valves if you have an early engine. The other things that need to be done to this are suspension. The suspension on these was garbage. The original struts that are on them, they were very poorly made. So you really need to upgrade to a cartridge strut. So you replace the other ones. The original ones used to come apart, and you take all the they would be full of oil and big mess, and then you would buy a cartridge strut that you would put back in there, and then that usually solved the issue. So the original struts on these were garbage. I mean, they would literally, I used to have one that I could bounce it from just pushing on the car a bunch of times. It wasn't that many miles. It had like 70,000 miles. And I'd bounce it, bounce it, bounce it until the car would jump right off the ground. I had a dasher like that. So I worked on these in the 80s. I'm gonna tell you, they were a lot of problems. So in order to make one of these work and make it a driver, you got to upgrade a ton of stuff. Other things I seen, like the alternator of mine one time, or one of the Rabbits that came in the shop, it vibrated because they come loose, especially with the diesel too. It's a good idea for every bolt you put on, take a little bit of silicone and put it on the threads before you put them back in. It keeps them from backing out. It's kind of like using blue Loctite, but actually a little bit handles the vibration better. But so I've done that a lot of times, most of the time when I do work on mine. But I've seen the alternator from vibrating loose wallow out the hole where the bracket goes so much that you had to replace the whole housing on the alternator. And I seen that, you know, I saw it multiple times. There's just so many little things that you have to do to these to upgrade it. So if you bought it or you're looking at one, you're looking at it on Bring a Trailer, and you're going, oh man, you know, this one's all original. You know, it's like, dude, put up the error of caution. You're probably going to spend a ton of money on that thing, even though it's all original. Maybe it's in great shape. Maybe it's all original German stuff. Original German doesn't mean anything. They were issued right out of the factory. These things had major engineering flaws right out of the factory, okay? And they need to be upgraded if you want to make it a reliable car to drive. That's why it got put in a barn, and that's why it got taken away, is because it was a problem for somebody, and that's why they'd stop driving it. So don't think you're going to get something super cool deal. You know, I was really fortunate to get this truck. This one here was original paint, Had never been in an accident. It did have a salvage on the title, but there was never, you could see, I had pictures of it, all original paint. And the guy I got it from a junkyard with no engine. Somebody scrapped this thing. They took it into the scrap yard, and it was completely, almost no dents in the whole thing. So it was worth saving, regardless of whether it's got a salvage on the title or not. I mean, it's a classic car. Who cares, really? You know, so I was able to get that like that. The guy I got it from, he put all new suspension in it before I got it, all new brakes. So I'm even going to go through and check those again because I haven't driven it in a while. But, you know, he did all that stuff and all the new stuff, and then I bought it from him because he just couldn't complete the project. He just started on it. I was really apprehensive when I bought this 10 years ago to actually use it as a daily driver. And because I knew about the issues with them. But there's nothing on this earth that gets 50 miles a gallon other than a brand new TDI, and they don't make a truck. And since then, I don't really need it anymore. I'm to the point where another issue with it is for tall people, the seats don't go back far enough in these, so it's not very good for a tall person, and I'm 6'3", so it's not very comfortable for me. I can't take long trips in it. It doesn't have cruise control. You know, those are all things that aren't good for me because, you know, I do long trips and stuff like that for my work. And so I ended up getting the TDI Sport Wagon, which seems to check all the boxes for me. So anyway, I'm getting this thing ready. In the near future, it's going to be up for sale. I don't know what a price is. And you guys could comment that, what you think it's worth. I have no idea. It's going to be whatever I sell this for. You could never build this car for what I'm selling it for. Never. There's no way in this world you could build this for what I'm going to sell it for. So it's got to go. I'm going to have to get it done. One thing that I'll be doing in the future here is I'm going to be upgrading the injector pump. I bought a new one because when it sat for a few years, because I wasn't driving it because I had the other car. The injector pumps on these things, if you sit too long, the I don't know what's called, primary pump or whatever, there's veins inside there that slide, and the veins get stuck, and then you have to either rebuild it or replace it. Now I've learned how to completely rebuild one of these. I bought a new one, and the new one was defective, and I couldn't get a warranty out of it. So I think what it was is they machined the pump housing a little bit off, and it didn't machine correctly, and so I don't know exactly how it worked out, but I have another, instead of this came with this truck had a 8mm pump, which was the smallest injection pump they made, and it doesn't make it get better gas mileage. It makes the fuel pressure lower. So higher fuel pressure can give you better gas mileage too. So I'm going to be putting a 11mm pump in here. So I'm going to change the back of the pump housing, take this off, replace the back of the pump housing, and then put it back in here. And we're going to see how the power is. Before I stop driving it, this truck would, with this engine, I could be idling in first, and if I stomped on the gas, the tires would break loose before I got out of first gear. And then if you give it a little clutch in second, it would burn the tires through second. So it has a lot of power with that one. So I'm expecting to see a little bit more power with the 11mm pump. I'm also putting the TDI MTDI rotor in it, which is steeper ramps on it. So the ramps on there will bring up the fuel pressure higher. So I'll have to retard the timing because it's going to be a lot of fuel pressure just shooting in all at once. So there's little things like that you're going to have to, that I got done to this, that I'm going to have done to this. So it will be interesting to see how that pans out. I planned on doing that at one point before I stopped driving it. I was going to do that with the injection pump, but and then I decided, I'm just going to fix the injection pump. Well, the fix didn't work, so now I'm just going to go ahead and do what I was going to originally do, and I bought all the parts, and we'll see that in the near future. But anyway, that's a buyer's guide for these guys. If you're looking at them, like this one's, the bumpers are tucked. You just drill the struts out and then slide them in and put a sheet metal screw in them. The other thing that was ugly on these, I don't like, was the rear bumpers were really ugly. They stuck way too far out. So I made this tube bumper, square tubing. You can even see the back is in pretty good shape. It hardly had any, and wasn't hardly used. It had a camper shell on it at one point, like a lot of them did. I'll tell you, the 1.9, you know, if you're going to do your own or whatever, that's fine. Just plan on budget that in. You're going to have to do it. If you want AC to work in one of these, it can work with a 1.6 with a turbo, but the 1.9 with a turbo, it's night and day. It's not even the same. So anyway, you can ask Thomas at Quality German Auto Parts. He'll tell you the same thing. He's got the 1.9 in his Vanagon, and he doesn't even have a turbo on it, and he says it's way better than the 1.6. Just doesn't even compare. So anyway, all right, I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and let's see your comments.